Caught in the crossfire. Caught in the...
What's up, guys? Lance the Obscure Movie Guy coming to you once again with another fun-filled, fact-filled video that you probably won't care about, but we're going to do it anyways, trying to change the world one post at a time. And today I'm going to be talking about a $2,000 micro-budget college student film that was done as a project for their final semester. Today I'm talking about Payne's Branch.
We were trying to track bear behavioral patterns. Because of Hurricane Helene, a lot of deforestation has occurred.
A lot of their environment has changed, and these bears are going to have to move into new areas. And a lot of people that have not seen bears or ever had any interaction with bears, there's a very good possibility that they have bears in their front yard, their backyard, or on their porch.
We're kind of stepping on their land here. Like, how would you feel if like a black bear came into our apartment?
There's like an absurd amount of bones at this spot. There's a whole skeleton over here. I think it's like a deer skeleton or something.
And with your long experience with working with bears and studying them, have you ever yourself had any close calls or any interactions?
Yes, I've had a few. And to be honest with you, the majority of the time that I've had it is when I surprised them. I showed up somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, and I got there in a quiet mode or a sudden quick move that I got into an area that they were at.
I might have overstayed our welcome a lot here, and I just need this to be over.
Promise me you won't go out and get it by yourself.
No, I'm going out there and getting it myself. I'm going to the forest.
No, I'll go with you. Just don't go there by yourself, promise me.
So Payne's Branch was written and directed by Jake Casey, starring Jake Casey and Thomas Tartar, and then the only other cast member listed is Chris Casey, which plays Professor Wayne Garrison, and Jake plays Jake, Thomas plays Thomas. And again, this was a college student film for their final semester, so I'm going to give it a little bit of grace in this review. However, it does have distribution. You can currently watch this on Folsom TV, which is kind of cool. It is a found footage mockumentary style film, and I use mockumentary, I use that term loosely because large in part this does come off as a documentary in certain areas, and we'll dive into that in just a minute. But basically tells the story of two guys that are doing a college project, so a college project within a college project, about bears and their habitat after it was destroyed in Hurricane Helene in the Appalachian Mountains, and what the bears have to go through in order to survive in some of the devastated areas, and the eating habits that they have turned to, less herbivore and more carnivore. So the opening act of the film is actually pretty good. The first 20 minutes is pretty solid. It establishes a lot as far as the characters go. It establishes a lot as far as what they are doing and what their intentions are. And they do a good job of, despite it just being Jake and Thomas, they do a good job of mixing up the locations and the characters themselves. So basically, they're doing a film within a film because they're trying to film this college project within the film itself, as kind of like for their YouTube channel and what these bears are going through. So they do a good job of doing that. And I liked Thomas because when Thomas is on film for the YouTube channel, he's a bad actor, but that's by design. Even though it's found footage, and I'm hoping this makes sense. His acting is more natural when he's just Thomas, not for the YouTube channel. So hopefully that makes sense. But he did a good job of being not so great in front of the camera when he's in front of the camera within the film. So it's I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, go watch the film and you'll figure out exactly what I'm talking about. But they did a good job of the first 20 minutes of the film of doing that. It's just those two, but they did multiple locations. And like I said, they establish a lot as far as what they're doing, what the intentions are, where they're at, and everything in between. After the first 20 minutes, there's a bit of a lull in the story. Basically, what you get is some filler. I don't know the specifics of how long this project needed to be in real life, how long this student film needed to be for their final semester, but there does seem to be a lot of filler within the storyline itself. After that first 20 minutes, you get outside the plot, and basically it's just kind of regular, everyday banter between Jake and Casey. They talk about shark attacks, they talk about DoorDash. It isn't necessarily anything that is of substance for the plot. It doesn't move the plot along, it doesn't tell you any more about what they're doing. And it just is there, I guess, as filler. Now, while there is a lot of filler, I did mention that this was a bit of a mockumentary, and again I use that term loosely because there is large aspects of this film where there does seem to be it does seem to be more actual factual documentary than mockumentary. So you are going to learn a lot about bears in this film, whether you want to or not. You're going to learn a lot about bears, and I'll give it to Jake. Everything seems to have checked out as far as, the actual hurricane in North Carolina did do some devastating damage to the wildlife. Bears, not just bears, but other animals have had to adapt to the devastation in the area. And you are going to learn a lot about bears and their eating habits, especially black bears, and just the nature in and of itself. So I'm not going to knock them for that because that stuff was actually, if you're into nature, it is kind of interesting. It is factual, so there is a lot of good information there. But from a storytelling standpoint, it is a documentary within the story itself, so it doesn't add anything necessarily to the plot. But they do set up, large in part, like I said, the first 20 minutes, they do tell you a lot about what they are establishing. And while they're doing that, they are setting up kind of like, um, field cams to see if they can get pictures of the bears. They're kind of setting up these peanut butter traps to see how see how the bears react to the peanut butter in the area. If they are in fact changing their habits, they do come across some bones of other animals in one area, which does allude to some of the things that you're going to find out very late in the film. But again, large in part, there's a large portion of this film that is a very, very much a documentary. There's a large portion of this film that is very much filler as well. So realistically, the first 20 minutes is essentially going to be your first act, and they did a really good job with that. The second act, you're not getting a whole lot of substance as far as the plot goes. They do find some bears and some things to be concerned with on the trail cameras. And this does start to give Jake, you'll see Jake as the movie progresses, he starts to become a little bit more stressed out about things. He becomes a little bit more stressed about going out into the woods and the things that he's seen. And he's starting to put, kind of pieces to the puzzle together. And he starts worrying about stuff, about this project, this bear project that they're doing in the film. So, the stuff does add a little bit, but realistically, there's so much filler that it can get overlooked until it's very late in the movie. But Jake does kind of get a little bit more stressed out the further and further you get into this film, and he starts worrying about Thomas a lot more. Now, I imagine Jake and Thomas are very good friends in real life, because the chemistry on screen is, it's there. You can obviously tell that they're very good friends. I will say in the third act, there's a bit of subtext there that I think a lot of college students could relate to, and probably something that felt like to me that Thomas is potentially struggling with in real life. And if not, that just goes to show how good of an actor he actually is. But there is a great message towards into the third act, towards the end of the film, about just the stresses that Thomas is dealing with. A bit of a personal message he gives to Jake on camera. Moving away from your friends, college is coming to an end. He's got this degree, he's not going to be able to find a job, he's having a hard time getting a job, doesn't want to be away from Jake. A lot of unknowns for college students that are graduating. So that was kind of, pretty cool. It was heartfelt, and like I said, possibly something that Thomas is struggling with in real life. If not, good for him. Hope things work out for him. He's a good actor. If not, um, so that was kind of cool. So your first act and your third act, they're pretty solid. Um, it's just there's a big lull in the middle of the film that makes it very hard to keep your attention, because a lot of the information about the bears does get regurgitated a little bit. But again, you do get to see a progressiveness in Jake's character where he is becoming more stressed and more worried about things. And you do find out at the very, very end what the issue was. And I don't want to give away the end at all. But I will say, this isn't, despite it being like found footage, and again, kind of a mockumentary. Um, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of a horror aspect from the film. If anybody's familiar with the folklore that surrounds the Appalachian Mountains, it's creepy. um, so there definitely could have been some of that interjected into the film that may have, especially in the second act, and maybe keep one's attention from wandering too often, maybe spice things up a little bit. So that would have been kind of cool. The Appalachian folklore is really creepy. And, having grown up in Maryland, where, we definitely got some Appalachian Mountains out there in Western Maryland and Garrett County and whatnot. You hear a lot of the stories, and Appalachian Mountains run, obviously, from like Pennsylvania down to like North Carolina. It's a big string of mountains. Um, so it would have been kind of cool if they would have added some of that folklore into the film itself, just to give it a little bit more spice. But I mean, all in all, for $2,000, and it being found footage, I think they did a pretty good job. And like I said, it's got some minor distribution. You can watch this on Folsom TV, which is kind of cool. Um, and Jake even said it's getting a little bit of traction on Folsom, because I mean, let's face it, found footage, for whatever reason, found footage, despite it being a very niche subgenre, it's a very passionate subgenre that people love. Found footage. It's a very much a love or hate relationship with found footage. Me personally, I don't necessarily like it a whole lot. I don't think that there's a lot you can do with found footage. But I have seen some good ones, and if you've been following me, you'll know that I've talked about DBS Films in the past, and they've got a whole slew of found footage films that they've been doing. So it's a very niche market, but it's a very passionate one. So that's probably why it is gaining some traction, because found footage does have some very passionate fans. So I think all in all, I don't know if Jake is trying to move into the movie making process, or Thomas for that matter. Didn't get a whole lot of background information as to what their grand plan is on anything, but this is definitely a good stepping stone. Kind of an expose of what they're capable of. And I think with a little bit more thought into the writing and the plot, they probably could have, gotten this to, as far as the story goes, to be a little bit more detailed and entertaining. But all in all, for a college student film as their final semester project, I think they checked all the boxes on what needed to be done. They better have gotten a good grade, Professor, if you're watching, because I think they did a pretty good job with minimal budget and minimal resources, because it is basically just them. It's the woods, but they make it work. So if they could have tightened up that filler and that lull in the second act, I think they could have done something really good. And again, I don't know if there was some sort of, what the guidelines were, if, the film had to be, 90 minutes or whatever the case may be. Realistically, if you cut out that second half, or not the second half, if you cut out that second act of the film, you have a really good short film that's roughly 30 minutes long. You've got a really good short film that you could have put together. So something to think about in the future. But I don't want to harp on them too bad. I appreciate Jake reaching out and sending me this. I think for the most part, they did a pretty good job. And again, if it's your first forte into doing something like this, don't stop, man, because you've got some potential. So go check out Payne's Branch on Folsom TV. It is currently available. Like, subscribe, and comment to my YouTube channel. Check me out on Facebook and Instagram. I'll see everybody in the next one.